Alright, in this brief tutorial, hopefully it's brief, we're going to look at SpeedyCo-pilot. It's a plugin that I recently installed for the XPlane Ultimate A320, and I really like this plugin. Now it is specifically for the Flight Factor A320. I'm hoping that they make other plugins for other airplanes, but because it is specific for the first officer, the first officer performs a lot of the procedures and actually sets the instrumentation on the plane. And since all planes are different in terms of their instruments and procedures, you can't make a universal plugin that does that. But SpeedyCo-pilot for Flight Factor A320 is a very good plugin, and once you understand how to use it, you will really come to like it, and it makes flying a breeze as the captain when you understand what the first officer is doing and what he does and what he doesn't do. Okay, so let's get started. To wake up the first officer, you have to click on the chocks here, and then you'll get this message here to preliminary cockpit prep, and you say click. And so the first officer then starts his process and procedure. You'll see that he's turned on the external power automatically. He's doing some tests, and he'll do a fire test for the APU, etc. And while he's doing his preliminary checklist, you want to check your fuel and your passengers and cargo, etc. And I see that we're almost out of fuel, so we don't want to be taking off without any fuel on board. It's a short flight, so we're to Buffalo today, so we're just putting enough fuel on for that. We do have a full flight, however. You see the passengers are full, and the cargo is about half. So once you set your fuel, passengers, and cargo, check your performance data, and we've got a reading here for the trim position of up 0.5. That background sound is just the co-pilot that is doing a fire test on the APU. So we've got our fuel, passengers, and cargo set, and we're just waiting for the first officer to finish his preliminary prep, which he should be done very shortly. So there's different phases on this, and
preliminary cockpit prep complete.
There's different triggers that you need to be aware of to signal to the first officer that we're proceeding to the next step or phase. And so the first two steps, you're prompted with these
doing your cockpit
push buttons down here, and the rest of the process and procedures, the first officer is activated by what you actually do in flight. So currently he's doing the cockpit preparation.
Takeoff flaps.
And once you see this signal here where the first officer is asking you whether you want flaps 1 or 2, that indicates that you can start programming your flight management system, or in the case of the Flight Factor A320, it's called the MCDU. And he's set these to nav mode here. That indicates that you can now start to program the MCDU. And so we're going to load a flight that we currently have loaded in the company route for Buffalo. So we're just going to type in CYYZ to KBuff, punch that into the company route, put in our flight number, and then we're going to go to the IRS init here. Sometimes the first officer is already ahead of you, and he's already plugged this in, and you've already got your reference aligning on reference points here. And something else the first officer will do, he will automatically calculate
data insertion ZFW,
the weight for the plane, and once he plugs that in. You'll see the extra fuel that you have on board and the trip time, and the trip actually is going to be it's only about a 25-minute trip, but the information is now put in there, and you can see that the first officer is also loaded into the flaps 2 with the trim position up 0.5. And we just click on to get the VR and the rotate values. We're 120 here, V1. Alright, then we're ready to start working on cleaning up our flight plan. Okay, our flight plan is ready to go, and while we're waiting for the first officer, if you look, he will not tell us to proceed to the next procedure until we actually have our map, our flight plan displayed here in the nav window. So while that is happening, let's go ahead and file our flight plan. Today we're going to use Pilot to ATC to file our flight plan and to communicate with air traffic control. So we're connecting Pilot to ATC to our flight simulator now. And the first thing that comes on once we connect is the ATIS information for Toronto International Airport. So let's go ahead and file our flight plan and start communicating with air traffic control. The plan is filed. Let's get clearance. Canadian Express 587 ready to copy IFR clearance.
Canadian Express 587 is cleared to Kilo Bravo Uniform Foxtrot. Fly the KEPTA-2 departure, with the RICOM transition, then as filed. Expect departure runway 23. Climb to 5,000 feet via the departure. Expect higher clearances 2 minutes after departure. Departure on 127.57 squawk 5411.
Canadian Express 587 is cleared to Kilo Bravo Uniform Foxtrot. Fly the KEPTA-2 departure, with the RICOM transition, then as filed. Climb to 5,000 feet via the departure. Expect higher clearances 2 minutes after departure. Departure on 127.57 squawk 5411.
Canadian Express 587 read back correct. Altimeter 3031 contact ground on 119.1 when ready for pushback. Have a good morning.
Altimeter 3031 ground on 119.1 Canadian Express 587.
Alright, so you can see here that we've got about 2 minutes left in the IR alignment. You can speed that up by going to the settings here, and it's already set on 2 times the speed, so we'll just leave it for now. One of the things that you'll notice here is quite often when you start the plane and the temperature in the back is quite considerably colder than the front, and sometimes the onboard crew will complain and ask you to see if you can do something about the temperature in the back. And that's a bonus that you get with the SpeedyCo-pilot, is you actually get an onboard flight crew that communicates with the passengers and that you can communicate with. And so previously I was using Passengers FX, but it's menu driven, but this is much better, it's automatic, and you use actual controls to communicate here with the to hear the cabin crew talking with the passengers, as well as you can send instructions to them. So we'll get into that a little bit later. In the meantime, it looks like we've got 1 minute until our plane comes in alignment and the map is displayed on the navigation display, and we are ready then for pushback. So let me just show you where to access the options for this. It's a fly with Lua script, and if you look under macros here, show the menu, this shows you all the options that you have before takeoff, climb, approach, etc., and gives you the options of what you want the PNF to do. The PNF stands for pilot non-flying, and so you can choose what you want the first officer to do and what you don't want him to do, and so those are the options that are set up under there. And in the meantime, we should be almost ready to go. So let's go ahead and get pushback clearance from the ground. Canadian Express 587 ready for pushback.
Canadian Express 587 pushback approved.
Pushback
Cockpit
approved.
preparation
Canadian
done for
Express
me. I will wait for
587.
you.
Alright, so we've got our map displayed now, and the first officer has informed us that he's ready for the next procedure, which is the pushback. The cockpit preparation is done. Alright, to signal the next phase now then, we need to go to our communication here and click on this communicate button right here. And that triggers the before pushback and start procedure. And you'll see that the stairs and the equipment is being moved away from the airplane. The doors are closed. He has started the APU unit here, so he's getting ready for the pushback. So let's go ahead and call the push truck. Okay.
Hello flight deck, doors closed and opposite checked.
So we haven't actually moved this plane parked in this spot before, so we need to give some instructions for our new pushback here.
All right,
Ladies
Captain,
and
got the
gentlemen,
directions.
I
Let me
am
know through the
Amanda
menu when
and
you're
I
ready.
am your chief flight attendant. On behalf
Before
of the
start,
captain and the
procedure
entire
done.
crew, welcome aboard. The captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. If you haven't already done so, please stow your carry-on luggage underneath the seat in front of you or in an overhead bin.
Great news, Captain.
Please
Your
take
tow's
your
coming.
seat. At this time, make sure your seat backs and tray tables are in their full upright position and that your seatbelt is correctly fastened. Also, your portable electronic devices must be set to airplane mode until an announcement is made upon arrival. Thank you. If you are seated next to an emergency exit, please read carefully the special instructions card located by your seat. If you do not wish to perform the functions described in the event of an emergency, please ask a flight attendant to reseat you. We remind you that this is a non-smoking flight. Smoking is prohibited on the entire aircraft, including the lavatories. If you have any questions about our flight, please don't hesitate to ask one of our flight attendants. Thank you.
All right.
Looks like the doors and hatches are closed and we're ready to connect.
So that was the cabin crew giving instructions to the passengers, and you can turn that off just by toggling this off and on. When it's on, it's white, and when it's off, it's dark. So at times when you need to communicate with air traffic control or with the ground services, you want to turn that off because it can be annoying in the background. But for now, we're just demonstrating what the SpeedyCo-pilot is and how it includes both the first officer functions as well as the cabin crew. and so it's pretty cool. So our pushback is now is
Welcome aboard, Captain.
connected.
Nose connected, bypass pins inserted. Go ahead and kill the parking brake when you're ready to go.
Alright, so let's just confirm that we do have our APU started here, which it's available. We'll turn on some heat here, and we'll start the pushback.
Here comes the pushback. Light them up.
Starting engine number 2.
So the first officer has done a number of things here in preparation for the pushback, including starting the APU, and is calling out the fact that we've started engine number 2, and then we'll start number 1. And once we start engine number 1, the cabin crew will come on and start giving additional instructions to the passengers in preparation for takeoff. So everything is done pretty much automatically, and I really like this plug-in called SpeedyCo-pilot for the Flight Factor A320. Alright, let's start the engine number 2 here, or number 1.
Starting engine number 1.
And you should hear
Ladies
the
and gentlemen,
cabin crew
we now
come on any
request your
second.
full
There we
attention
go.
as the flight attendants demonstrate the safety features of this aircraft. When the seatbelt sign illuminates,
done here.
you
Go ahead and
must
set your
fasten your
parking
seatbelt. Insert the metal fittings one into the other and tighten by
And
pulling
we're
on the loose
disconnecting,
end of the
so
strap.
give me just a moment.
To release your seat belt, lift the upper portion of the buckle. We suggest that you keep your seatbelt fastened throughout the flight, as we may experience turbulence. There are several emergency exits on this aircraft, 2 forward, 2 aft, and 2 over each wing. Please take a few moments now to locate your nearest exit. In some cases, your nearest exit may be behind you. If we need to evacuate the aircraft, floor-level lighting will guide you towards the exit. Doors can be opened by moving the handle in the direction of the arrow. Each door is equipped with an inflatable slide which may also be detached and used
After
as a
start
life
flow
raft.
finished.
Oxygen and the air pressure are always being monitored. In the event of a decompression, an oxygen mask will automatically appear in front of you. To start the
And we're
flow of
disconnected.
oxygen,
Signal and
pull
pin
the
on the
mask
left. Take
towards
it easy
you.
and have a safe flight.
Place it firmly over your nose and mouth, secure the elastic band behind your head, and breathe normally. Although the bag does not inflate, oxygen is flowing to the mask. If you are traveling with a child or someone who requires assistance, secure your mask on first, and then assist the other person. Keep your mask on until a uniformed crew member advises you to remove it. In the event of an emergency, please assume the bracing position. A life vest is located in a pouch under your seat or between the armrests. When instructed to do so, open the plastic pouch and remove the vest. Slip.
Alright, so we're ready to get taxi request here, so we're going to turn off the cabin crew and get our taxi information. Canadian Express 587, request taxi.
Canadian Express 587 taxi to runway 23 via taxiways Alpha Kilo, Alpha, Hotel, Quebec.
Taxi to runway 23 via taxiways Alpha Kilo, Alpha, Hotel, Quebec, Canadian Express 587.
Alright, so we're ready for the next procedure now, which is to taxi. And in order to signal to the first officer that we're ready to taxi, you need to just verify that you've got the engines turned off here to normal. the ignition, that we've also got the APU turned off. We'll turn on the oxygen supply there. And to signal, then you turn on the taxi light. And now the first officer is waiting for you to do the control checks, the flight controls, the ailerons, the rudders, and your flight controls. So if you're using a joystick, that's where you would move the joystick to all 4 positions.
Flight controls
Full up.
check. Full down. Neutral. Full left. Full right. Neutral. Check complete.
Okay, so we've done the check complete.
Check no blue. I am ready to taxi in for the checklist.
Alright, so the first officer has let us know now that we're ready to taxi. Now if you look at the checklist here, you'll see that the cabin isn't ready yet, and this is normal. The cabin crew is getting ready for departure still. And if you look, actually, the first officer controls the lights, and you'll see the lights are on full. When you're in the takeoff mode, you'll find that the first officer automatically dims the cabin and also dims the lights in the cockpit, but right now they're still getting the cabin ready for takeoff. But we can go ahead and taxi, and at some point during the taxi they'll let us know that the cabin is ready. Now we're flying out of a very busy airport, which is Toronto International, so we have a plug-in called Live Traffic, which is real traffic, and this is traffic in real time with only about a 90-second delay. So getting in and out of Toronto without hitting something is a bit of a challenge, as there's always a lot of planes moving around. Now in live traffic you can turn on the option to not show any traffic during taxi, but I always find it interesting to see the actual flights that are leaving and departing and how busy it actually is. So this is just using live traffic. So we're in the taxi process now, and at some point during our taxi procedures, the cabin crew will let us know that the cabin is secure and ready for takeoff. It's quite a foggy morning here in Toronto, so we're not going to see much on the takeoff. And one of the things, another plugin that I like is one that's created by SAM, which stands for Scenery Animation Manager. They have full 5 seasons for the X-Plane. And when you're flying in Canada in the middle of the winter, it's more realistic when you look outside, if you actually see snow on the ground and the trees covered in snow, etc. So the 4-season plug-in is a must.
Cabin is secured for takeoff.
Is a must, I feel, because it's much more realistic. Now we're not going to actually see the snow today because as I mentioned, the weather is very poor. We've got flying in dense fog for takeoff. But this plug-in, I'll just show it to you here. It's under SAM, the colors and seasons, and you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different seasons you can choose. And currently we have deep winter in Canada. It's minus 14 degrees outside with at least a foot of snow on the ground. So I really like that plug-in. It gives a much more realistic landscape as you're flying, when you see snow instead of green trees in the middle of winter. We're getting near the end of the taxiway now, and soon the air traffic controller will come on and tell us that to contact the tower for clearance for takeoff. And before we enter the runway, there's some final procedures that the first officer will perform, and I'll tell you what those are and how to trigger them before we actually pull onto the runway, because there are a number of things, of course, that are not done yet, including the fact that we don't have our landing lights on and we don't have the squawk box set for live altitude, and there's quite a bit of traffic in front of us here, as Toronto is a very busy airport. So we're just gonna pass these. That's a car that shows there's a plane there, but we don't have a model showing what the plane is, so it's just a car.
Canadian Express 587, contact tower on 118.0. Have a good morning.
Tower on 118.0, Canadian Express 587.
Alright, so we know that our trim is to be up 0.5, so we better set that before we take off here. Bad things can happen if you don't set your trim before takeoff. And we'll just get clearance now from the tower. Tower, Canadian Express 587, ready for departure, runway 23.
Canadian Express 587, winds are light and variable, cleared for takeoff, runway 23, squawk 5411.
Cleared for takeoff, runway 23, squawking 5411, Canadian Express 587.
And as you can see, a plane just landed on runway 23 ahead of us there, and that is real traffic coming in. The plugin I'm using is called Live Traffic, and it gives you the real live traffic.
Approaching 2-3.
There may be a 90-second delay, but that is real traffic, real flights coming in. So the final information that we want the first officer to do is to prep us for the runway. So before you enter the runway, you need to look both ways.
Checked.
And you heard him say check there.
Checked.
And so we've checked for traffic going both ways. Then we need to put on the
Runway entry procedure, and I'm ready.
the runway lights, and then the first officer will do the rest. He's set our squawk box to live, and he's put on the lights that are needed, including the strobes, and we're ready to enter the runway now after this plane pulls in front of us. We're pulling out onto an active runway, so it's always a challenge to get in and out of Toronto without hitting anything.
On runway 23.
I just realized we haven't set our altitude here yet. You want to do that before you take off.
Manflex, SRS runway.
100 knots.
V1.
Rotate.
Okay, so the other thing I like about SpeedyCo-pilot is it calls out the speeds for you as you take off. As it's very hard to see the speed when you're in this
Positive
view
climb.
for takeoff. The first officer will also automatically retract your landing gears for you and automatically retract your flaps at the correct speeds. So he's a pretty smart first
Flaps
officer.
off. Running. Do you want the after takeoff checklist?
Nav.
Alt blue.
Canadian Express 587 turn left
Alpha
heading
Forcer.
168, then intercept course to Savre then as filed.
Heading 168 to Savre then as filed. Canadian Express 587.
Alright, so when we get the correct speed here, we'll put on the autopilot. And we've hit the green marker there, so we can also set our climb throttle.
Canadian Express 587 climb and maintain 1000 feet, contact Toronto departure on 128.8. Enjoy your morning.
So you
Climb
notice
and maintain
that
1,000 feet departure on 128.8 Canadian Express 587.
Alright. So you'll notice the lock is on here for the takeoff and go around. So
Departure Canadian Express 587 climbing to 1,000 feet.
Canadian Express 587 good morning. Radar contact.
So to fix that, just on the auto throttle here, just turn it off and then turn it on again, and you'll see that you're now on the throttle climb, which is the correct setting that you want to be on. Alright, so we've managed to take off, and the first officer did his job. The next time that he'll come on and do something is when we pass flight level 100. The cabin crew in the back will also inform the passengers that we've passed flight level 100 and tell them they can now use their electronic appliances and possibly remove their seat belts, etc. if needed. So currently we're in the climbing through 8,600 feet. And as you can see, there's heavy fog and cloud. You can't see the ground at all, which if you could, you would see snow below us.
Outstar.
Flight level 1,000 to 100. go.
Alright, there were two announcements that came on there. One was what we passed flight level 100. The other one was that we're 1,000 feet to go because we're actually cruising at only 11,000 feet on our short flight to Buffalo today. So we've almost at our cruising altitude already here. Now, I didn't hear the cabin come on. That's because we had
Enjoy
it
the
turned off. There we go. Just got the tail end there. So the cabin crew will come on and tell the passengers that we've passed flight level flight level 100. Alright, we're at our cruising altitude and our cruising speed, and there's not much else happening. I did mention that you can signal to the cabin crew to make announcements, and I'll just show you how to do that. This little box here, communication box, if you click it, it instructs the cabin crew to make an announcement.
Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned off the fasten seatbelt sign. You may now move about the cabin. We recommend that you keep your seatbelt fastened whenever seated. You may now turn on your electronic devices, such as calculators, mobile phones, and laptop computers.
So once you're into flight a little bit as well, when you click that again, it'll prompt the cabin crew to instruct the passengers that they'll be serving a meal or a drink.
Canadian Express 587 contact Toronto Centre on 134.25. Have a good morning.
Center on 134.25. Take care Canadian Express 587. Center Canadian Express 587 at 1000 feet.
Canadian Express 587 good morning. Radar contact. Altimeter 3035.
Altimeter 3035 Canadian Express 587.
Canadian Express 587 contact Cleveland Center on 125.2. Enjoy your morning.
Center on 125.2 Canadian Express 587. Center Canadian Express 587 at 1100 feet.
Canadian Express 587 good morning. Radar contact.
So because we're crossing the border from Canada to the US, we're actually flying through a lot of different control centers, so you're going to find that the air traffic controller is handing us off to a lot of different centers. First to Cleveland, and then we'll be handed over to Buffalo Approach very shortly, and then to Tower, etc. So there's a lot of air traffic control communication on this flight. Even though it's a short flight, it's pretty busy keeping track with the air traffic control.
Canadian Express 587 contact Buffalo Approach on 126.15. Have a good morning.
Approach on 126.15 Canadian Express 587. Approach Canadian Express 587 at 1100 feet.
Canadian Express 587 good morning. Radar contact. Expect the ILS approach to runway 23 with the Triva transition at Buffalo Niagara International cleared direct to Wozy then direct Triva.
Expect the ILS approach to runway 23 with the Triva transition cleared direct Wozy then direct Triva Canadian Express 587.
Alright, so we better give the passengers a drink.
Ladies and gentlemen, in a few moments, the flight attendants will be passing cold drinks and a light meal. Please prepare your folding tables. Make sure your seats are in an upright position.
So it's a short flight today, but just demonstrating the different functions of SpeedyCo-pilot. And once you understand what the co-pilot does and what he doesn't does, what triggers him to do this, that, and the other thing, it makes flying the A320 a breeze. And as the captain, you can drink a lot of coffee just and sit back and relax, knowing that the co-pilot's handling most of the functions for the instrumentation. So we're now just about 3 minutes away from our top of descent, and we'll go through what happens when we hit our top of descent and start descending to the approach, what it is that the co-pilot does. You'll notice over here that he controls, or she controls, depending on who the first officer is, the lighting in the cabin. And if we look at the heat now too, you'll see that it's now a comfortable temperature. The temperature has come up from the chilly start in Toronto, and sometimes, as I mentioned, you'll get complaints from the cabin crew when you first get in the plane that it's very cold in the back, and please do something about the temperature. But right now everything is good. As we get close to the top of descent, we'll want to slow our speed when we're about a minute out, and then the air traffic controller will direct us from there to the correct altitudes for descending. If you look at our flight plan here, you'll see, we'll just expand that out a little bit, you'll see that we're going to, our next waypoint is Woolsey. When we cross Woolsey, we're going to take this leg down here and then come around for an ILS landing back onto Buffalo. So we're going to actually fly right over the airport, coming in at about between 10 and 7,000 feet, circle back around and then come in on the runway here. And the first officer has some functions that they do. They automatically set your flaps for you on the speeds accordingly. They'll put down the landing gear and several other things when we're ready for approach. So now we're ready to start slowing the plane down for our top of descent. Let's slow it down to 250. And we should be hearing instructions from the air traffic control any
Canadian
second.
Express 587 descend and maintain 7,000 feet altimeter 3033 at Buffalo Niagara International.
Descend and maintain 7,000 feet. Canadian Express 587.
Open descent. Alt blue.
Alright, so we've started our descent, and we're doing an open descent, which will descend at approximately 1,500 feet per minute. When we pass the flight level 100, then the first officer will automatically put on the landing lights, and they'll give instructions to the passengers as well at some point.
Flight level 100.
Canadian Express 587 altimeter 3033 at Buffalo Niagara International descend and maintain 4,000 feet cleared for the ILS approach to runway 23 at Buffalo Niagara International with the TRVA transition.
Altimeter 3033 descend and maintain 4,000 feet cleared for the ILS approach to runway 23 with the TRVA transition. Canadian Express 587.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we start our descent, please make sure your seat backs and tray tables are in their full upright position. Make sure your seatbelt is securely fastened and all carry-on luggage is stowed underneath the seats in front of you or in the overhead bins. Thank you.
Alright, so the first officer will flip on the landing lights as we pass through descending flight level 100, and the cabin crew will also come on with announcements for the passengers to prepare for landing, to buckle up, etc. And we continue our descent. We're currently at 250 knots, but we want to slow that down a little bit. So we're going to bring it down to 225 here. And let's change our scale back a little bit now that as we're getting closer to landing. Alright, I'm not liking the descent speed, so we're going to actually
VS. Alt blue.
we're going to manually set the descent rate here. As we're getting close to our turn, we want to be down around 4,000 feet by the time we get into that turn.
Ladies and gentlemen, the fasten seatbelt sign has been turned on. Please rejoin your seat and fasten your seatbelt.
I put a little bit of speed brake on as well, just to slow the plane down a little bit and to keep it from overspeed as we're descending. Still can't see nothing outside. We're in a complete fog, which means we're going to be landing in close to zero visibility today.
$1,000 to go.
Alright, so that's 1,000 to go till we hit our flight level 4,000 as directed by air traffic control, and we'll be making our final turn for the approach.
Canadian Express 587 altimeter 3033 at Buffalo Niagara International Contact Tower on 120.5. Enjoy your morning.
Altimeter 3033 tower on 120.5 Canadian Express 587.
Alright, we're starting our final
Tower
turn.
Canadian
Speed
Express
checked.
587
Flaps 1.
inbound for ILS approach runway 23.
Canadian Express 587 good morning. Radar contact. Continue ILS to runway 23 call when established on final.
Continue ILS to runway 23 will call when established on final Canadian Express 587.
Alright, so we're slowing the plane down a bit more, and the first officer has automatically put the flaps down for
Speed
us.
checked. Flaps 2.
And he's also put the gear down. So he's put flaps 2, gear down. And we're lining up for the ILS approach, so we want to put on our landing system. We're still about 14 miles from the airport, so we have lots of time to line this up properly. We are going to be landing in almost zero visibility today, however, so you won't see the runway till we're almost there. It looks like it anyhow, but you can't see anything outside. Alright, so once that bar starts to move, you want to put on the
Lock star.
So the lock star indicates that the bar has come inside the circle here, and hopefully it holds, and the plane is now overcompensated and is coming back the other way, trying to get a lock. And when it lines up perfectly, the first officer will call out a lock, that things have lined up on a perfect lock. And you can see here the diamond has started to also move down, so we're going to put on the approach.
Glide slope blue.
For the glide slope. Glide slope blue means that we've put on the approach, and we're waiting for the plane to enter the glide slope. We're coming in underneath the glide slope. I'll just make that a little bigger so we can see it here.
Glide slope star.
Okay, the glide slope star, which means it's in almost at the position where it can lock into the final glide slope. And we can inform the tower now that we're on final.
Glide slope.
Canadian Express 587 established on final.
Canadian Express 587 winds
Flaps
are
full.
111 at 7 knots, cleared to land runway 23.
Cleared to land runway 23 Canadian Express 587.
Alright, we'll slow the plane down a little bit more. We've got flaps on full now. When we're
Radio
about,
altimeter alive.
so the radio altimeter, that's not a barometric pressure, but it measures the distance from the ground, and it's more accurate than the barometric pressure. And so now it is counting out on here the distance that we are from the ground, and once we hit right here, you'll see we're at 1900 feet currently, and that'll talk us right down to the airport runway. It'll call out the 500, 400, 300, etc. So we're coming in good. We're at the 5 nautical mile mark now, so we'll slow the plane to the final speed that we want for landing. And we've got flaps out full, landing gear down, lights on, cabin is ready. As you look here, the cabin is ready, the seatbelt signs are on, landing gear down, spoilers are armed, flaps full, we're all set for landing. To disengage the autopilot, you use this red button here, and we'll disengage it probably only at about 200 feet today because of the poor visibility.
1,000.
First officer has done his job. SpeedyCo-pilot has done a good job as a plug-in, and once you get used to what the co-pilot
Approaching
does
23
and doesn't do, it really makes flying a breeze. So that when you're coming in for zero visibility here, you can relax and rest assured the co-pilot has done everything that he needs to do. You can see also that the cabin lights have been turned off. He controls the lights, controls everything. It's great. We're at 500 feet now, though. We can't see anything. It's a little concerning. All right, coming in.
300.
All right, we see a little bit here at 300. Disengage at 200.
200. 100.
Throttle back.
50. 40. 30. 20. Retard. 10. 5.
Ground spoilers.
Reverse
Canadian
green.
Express 587 exit runway when able.
Okay, so after landing, the first officer
Ladies and
does everything that he's
gentlemen,
supposed to.
welcome the
He
airport.
turns off the
For your
landing
safety
lights.
and comfort, please
He
remain
turns
seated
off
with your
your,
seatbelt fastened until the captain turns off the fasten seatbelt sign. This will
squawk
indicate
box,
that we have parked
puts
at
it
the
on
gate and that it
standby.
is safe for you to move about. Mobile phones may only be
The
used
flaps
once
are
the fasten
retracted.
seatbelt sign
The
has been turned
spoilers
off.
are
Please check around
retracted.
your seat for any personal belongings you may have brought on board with you, and please use caution when opening the overhead bins, as heavy articles may have shifted around during the flight. If you require deplaning assistance, please remain in your seat until all other passengers have deplaned. One of our crew members will then be pleased to assist you. On behalf of our airline and the entire crew, I'd like to
Clear of
thank you for
active
joining us on
Canadian
this
Express
trip, and we are looking
587.
forward to seeing you
Canadian
again
Express
in the near
587,
future.
welcome to
Have a
Buffalo,
nice
Niagara
day.
International Contact Ground on 133.2. Good day.
Ground on 133.2 Canadian Express 587.
Alright, so that's pretty much it for SpeedyCo-pilot and how to use it. There is one final procedure that they do when you land at the gate here, and I'll show you how to trigger that. But right now we've got to watch out for the ground traffic coming in here. Alright, let's see what we got here. Well, you can just see the sticks. You almost have to get out of your seat to see that one. Alright, so sometimes the first officer will turn on the APU and sometimes he won't, so that's something you have to watch for. But before you can shut the engines off, you need power, either ground power or the APU, and it's probably safer to shut the engines off before calling the ground power. So I like to have the APU running, and that's one of the things on landing. I'll often check that before I get to the gate that the APU has been turned on, because it does take time to start up. But I wanted to show you the last thing on the SpeedyCo-pilot that triggers bringing out the ground services. And we'll do that in a second here once we got our APU. Alright, we've got APU services now. We can turn off the fasten seatbelt signs, and we'll shut down the engines. Alright, so what triggers the first officer to call the ground services is turning off this beacon light here. So when you turn off the lights here, then the first officer will call the ground services. You can see he's already turned off all of the pumps and everything, and you'll see the everything is ground services are ready to deplane. And that's it for the tutorial on how to use SpeedyCo-pilot.